In the dead of night on the 7th of May 2025, as most of South Asia slept, a squadron of Indian fighters and drones slipped across the frontier, their engines barely whispering over the desert plains of Punjab. Their mission was brief and uncompromising: to strike 9 concealed terror camps deep inside Pakistani territory, destroy the infrastructure that had harbored the architects of the Pahalgam massacre, and vanish before dawn. There was no grand parade, no obtrusive show of force, only precise surgical executions that lasted barely 23 minutes from first launch to last missile impact. By 1:28 a.m., high-resolution satellite feeds showed the camps in flames, tents torn open, bunkers collapsed, fuel depots reduced to smoking craters. India's political and military leadership watched live in New Delhi, confident that every strike had found its mark. In briefing rooms illuminated by the glow of screens, they monitored feeds from Rafale jets armed with scalp missiles, from Heron drones loitering overhead, and from ground station radars tracking the final splashdown of each warhead. When the last bomb fell, they saw no tracings of civilian structures, no civilian lives caught in the crossfire, only the remains of terrorist hideouts, places that had, until those minutes, been beyond the reach of Indian forces. By sunrise, India had released official satellite imagery, detailed target lists, and time-stamped footage, proving that every camp belonged to extremist outfits linked to Jaish, Mohammed Lashkar, Taiba, and Hizbul Mujahideen. They underscored that no Pakistani military installation or civilian settlement had been touched. The operation was dubbed Sindoor, a reference to the vermilion mark of resolve and sacrifice, yet its execution was clinical, almost antiseptic, designed to send a message without provoking open war. International reaction was swift. Western capitals spoke in guarded admiration. Phrases like measured restraint and textbook counter-terrorism appeared in diplomatic cables. The United Nations urged de-escalation but lauded India's careful planning. Even in Beijing, state news outlets ran cautious reports noting India's precision while emphasizing the need to respect international borders. But back in Islamabad, the tone was starkly different. Within hours, Pakistan's Foreign Office and military spokespersons sprang into action, spinning a narrative of unprovoked aggression and blatant violation of sovereignty. Pakistan's information minister claimed to have scrambled air defenses, shot down multiple Rafales, and protected civilian areas with miraculous success. Pakistani television channels amplified the rhetoric, showing grainy images they said were proof of Indian jets plummeting from the sky or missiles hitting residential neighborhoods. Hashtags like #IndiaBombsKids and #StopIndianTerror trended on Pakistani social media, carried by troll farms and paid influencers. The country's press displayed images of damaged mosques and grieving families, yet neither the videos nor the statistics matched the meticulously logged coordinates India had released. Behind the scenes, Pakistan's generals held closed-door meetings, furious that India had not only struck so decisively, but had also anticipated their every move. The chairman of Pakistan's Joint Chiefs, according to later leaks, railed at junior commanders for failing to detect the incoming drones until they were moments from release. Pakistani air defenses, supposedly primed for any Indian incursion, had been bypassed entirely. For a regime that habitually cited its military prowess, this was a blow to credibility. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, national security advisors and ministry officials calmly managed the fallout. They knew that a longer conflict would be disastrous for both sides, economically, diplomatically, and morally. Within 48 hours, back-channel talks mediated by a third party had eased tensions. Indian and Pakistani hotlines buzzed with overtures of restraint. By 10 May, a ceasefire was in place along the line of control. India quietly withdrew its remaining assets from Pakistani airspace, and Islamabad claimed the operation had ended with minimal Pakistani casualties, though it never produced concrete evidence. What remained permanent, however, was the record of precision. Independent analysts in London and Dubai compared damage assessments to India's published coordinates and confirmed that only the designated terror camps had been hit. The global press noted the stark contrast between India's evidence-based disclosures and Pakistan's emotion-driven denials. In the weeks that followed, Pakistani social media slipped from outrage to conspiracy theories, some alleging that the entire operation had been staged inside India, others claiming the videos were doctored by Western intelligence agencies. Through it all, the Indian narrative held firm, a nation determined to protect its citizens and punish those who murder innocents, yet unwilling to escalate beyond a singular targeted action. There was no chest thumping, no demand for glory, only a quiet announcement that justice had been served, swiftly and surgically. And when global leaders called for peace, India reiterated its readiness to defend its sovereignty while remaining open to dialogue. For a neutral observer, the unfolding of Operation Sindoor underscores a simple truth in modern conflict: credibility and evidence matter as much as firepower. A missile that finds its mark and then leaves behind irrefutable proof is far more potent than 1,000 blustering threats. India demonstrated both precision and prudence, projecting power without posturing. Pakistan, by contrast, resorted to hollow claims and unverifiable footage, exposing a deeper insecurity about its own capabilities. As the dust settles on the desert plains where it all began, one message endures: action backed by transparency will always outlast empty rhetoric. Operation Sindoor was not a display of bravado, it was a calculated assertion of real power. Meanwhile, the echoes of fake news will fade, replaced by the quiet knowledge that when it matters most, deeds speak louder than denials. In the aftermath of those tense days, strategists in capitals from Washington to Tokyo pored over the lessons of Operation Sindoor. It was clear that the age of indiscriminate bombardment had given way to a new paradigm: precise intelligence-driven strikes coupled with real-time evidence sharing. India's choice to release geolocated imagery and time-stamped flight logs did more than validate its actions. It reshaped international expectations for accountability in cross-border operations. Military planners noted that when an attacker can prove the legitimacy of its target set, it simultaneously undermines the propaganda efforts of its adversary. For Pakistan, the episode left a more sobering lesson. Relying on nationalist fervor to mask gaps in early warning systems and air defense readiness proved costly. In the digital era, attempts to bury inconvenient truths under a flood of disinformation only dilute credibility further. Islamabad's inability to provide independent verification of its denials and its reliance on emotionally charged, unverifiable footage eroded trust even among friendly audiences. Moreover, the swift transition from outrage to conspiracy theories revealed a vulnerability. Once a government loses control of its narrative, it can never fully reclaim it. Back in New Delhi, security analysts quietly celebrated the ripple effects of Operation Sindoor. Beyond neutralizing terror infrastructure, India had tested new doctrines in electronic warfare and unmanned systems. Loitering munitions proved their worth in identifying and striking fleeting targets, while fighter drone coordination set a template for future operations. Equally important was the successful diplomatic containment. By resisting calls for wider retaliation and engaging in discreet ceasefire talks, India avoided the trap of escalation. It demonstrated that power could be asserted without sacrificing regional stability. The broader geopolitical community took notice. South Asian neighbors, long accustomed to the India-Pakistan rivalry's cyclical violence, sensed a shift. India's conduct suggested a maturing defense posture, one that balanced deterrence with restraint. Partners in Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Gulf reassessed their own crisis response frameworks, taking cues from India's emphasis on rapid deployment corridors and pre-authorized evacuation and strike protocols. Even NATO planners studied the coordination between India's air and intelligence wings, seeing parallels for operations in contested theaters elsewhere. On the home front, public response in India was muted but firm. There were no triumphalist parades. The government framed the success of Operation Sindoor as a solemn duty fulfilled. Editorials praised the leadership for avoiding civilian harm and preventing wider conflict, while opinion polls showed broad support for the strike on terror camps. The muted tone reinforced the message that India's use of force was purposeful, not performative. Yet perhaps the most enduring impact of those few pre-dawn strikes lies in the realm of information warfare. Operation Sindoor closed the gap between action and perception, setting a precedent that in future crises, operators would need not only to strike accurate, but also to demonstrate that accuracy in near real time. It foreshadowed a new contest, the duel of data, evidence, and narrative. In that duel, India had claimed the high ground. As tensions along the border ebbed back to a guarded normalcy, military exercises resumed, diplomats returned to routine shuttle missions, and border communities tentatively resumed cross-Lu trade. But beneath the surface, a transformation had taken root. Both nations now understood that the next clash, whether kinetic or cyber, would hinge as much on information dominance as on missiles and drones. In that shifting landscape, credibility became a weapon, and transparency the shield. For a neutral observer weighing the balance of power in South Asia, Operation Sindoor marked a turning point. It reaffirmed that a state willing to invest in precise intelligence, disciplined execution, and transparent communication can wield influence far beyond its military footprint. Conversely, it warned that denial without data only deepens isolation, and for the wider world, it offered a clear takeaway. In an era awash with fake news, the ultimate victory belongs to the side that can convincingly show the world what really happened. In the broader arc of South Asian geopolitics, Operation Sindoor may have lasted mere minutes on the battlefield, but its consequences will linger far longer in the strategic memory of the region. It was not just a display of force, it was a declaration of intent, a message delivered not through speeches but through silence, precision, and restraint. India, through this operation, revealed a shift in posture. It no longer seeks to merely react to provocation or endure the cycle of condemnation and diplomacy. It now operates with autonomy, willing to act, but unwilling to escalate recklessly. It has shown that it possesses both the capability and the judgment to strike hard, strike clean, and return without fanfare. That in itself is a demonstration of maturity that goes beyond military strength. It is the evolution of doctrine. There was no dramatic buildup, no ultimatum, just cold, exact calculations executed in the dead of night. For a country that has long been the target of cross-border extremism, Operation Sindoor marked a threshold, the point at which deterrence becomes more than a policy. It becomes a lived reality. Pakistan, on the other hand, found itself trapped by its own narrative. Having relied for years on ambiguity, denial, and misdirection, it struggled to confront an opponent that no longer played by its familiar script. When faced with evidence-based action, the usual tools, misinformation, inflated claims, emotional appeals, fell short. What it offered the world was not a counter-narrative, but confusion. In doing so, it weakened its own position far more than India's weapons ever could. This was not a war, and yet it was a test of credibility, of clarity, of who would control the story after the smoke cleared. And India passed it, not with noise, but with precision. As the region returns to a tense calm, there is something deeper that lingers. A lesson perhaps for any nation that finds itself at a crossroads between action and restraint. Power today is not simply measured in range or payload, but in how it is wielded. The real victory lies not in destruction, but in definition, in shaping the terms of engagement and walking away without losing balance. Operation Sindoor will not be remembered as a grand battle. It will be remembered as a turning point, where one nation chose calculated resolve, and another lost itself in the fog of denial. In a world flooded with noise, what mattered most was not who shouted, but who showed the world what really happened. And in that quiet clarity, India changed the game.